The great amphitheater of Station Orbis had seen thousands of species stand in its center. Some came with fear in their hearts. Others came with pride. A few came with weapons hidden beneath their robes, though they never made it past the first security checkpoint. Today, single human woman stood in that ancient circle of judgment. Unipark was not tall. She was not armed. She wore a simple dark blue suit that her younger brother Tay had picked out for her, saying it made her look official, but not scary. She had laughed at that. Now, standing before 12 alien species who would decide humanity's fate, she understood what he meant. The amphitheater rose around her in rings of stone and light. Each ring held delegates from a different species. Some had scales. Some had feathers. Some had bodies made of crystal or shadow or things Yuna could not name. All of them watched her with eyes that were not human, minds that were not human, and expectations she could only guess at. Counselor Vareth stood at the highest ring. He was tall and insectoid, with 4 arms and a face like a mantis carved from black glass. His voice echoed through the chamber, translated instantly into Yuna's earpiece. "The human delegation seeks membership in the Galactic Council," Vareth announced. "As is tradition, the candidate species must undergo evaluation. This is not punishment. This is not judgment. This is simply understanding." Yuna nodded. She had been briefed on this. Every species that joined the council went through the same process. A telepath would touch her mind, read her thoughts, and determine if humanity was trustworthy. It sounded simple enough. It was not simple at all. From the 3rd ring, a group of beings began to descend. They moved like water flowing downhill, their bodies pale and glowing with soft blue light. These were the Mindweavers, the telepaths, who had served the council for 10,000 years. They could read any mind. They could see any secret. No species had ever hidden anything from them. Yuna watched them approach. She kept her breathing steady. She had practiced this moment 100 times in simulations, but nothing could truly prepare her for standing in front of aliens who could look inside her head. One Mindweaver separated from the group. She was young, at least by the standards of her kind. Her skin was the color of moonlight, and her eyes were large and dark, like pools of black water. She had 3 fingers on each hand, long and delicate, and she moved with a grace that made Yuna think of dancers. "I am Alara," the Mindweaver said. Her voice was soft, almost musical. "I will perform the reading. Do you consent?" Yuna nodded again. "I consent. You understand that I will see your thoughts? Your memories? Your fears and hopes and secrets?" "I understand." Alara tilted her head slightly. There was something like curiosity in her dark eyes. Most species show fear at this moment. You do not. Why? Yuna thought about the question. She could lie, but what was the point? The telepath would see the truth anyway. "I am afraid," Yuna admitted, "but I have learned to act despite fear. Where I come from, we call that courage." A murmur ran through the amphitheater. Some of the delegates leaned forward. Others exchanged glances that Yuna could not interpret. Ilara smiled. It was a small smile, gentle and perhaps a little condescending. She had touched thousands of minds across hundreds of worlds. She had seen warriors and cowards, geniuses and fools, saints and monsters. A human was just another mind to read. "Then let us begin," Ilara said. She raised her hand. Her 3 fingers spread wide, pale and glowing. Yuna stood very still as the Mindweaver stepped closer. She could smell something strange, like flowers and electricity mixed together. Ilara's fingers touched her temple. The touch was cool. It was almost cold. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Ilara's eyes went wide. The amphitheater fell silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Every delegate, every observer, every guard and servant watched the 2 figures in the center of the circle. This was the moment of truth. This was when the telepath would announce what she had found. But Ilara said nothing. Her hand remained on Yuna's temple, her fingers trembling slightly. Her glowing skin began to flicker, the light pulsing unevenly, like a heartbeat going wrong. Her dark eyes, which had been calm and confident moments ago, now showed something that no one in the amphitheater had ever seen on a Mindweaver's face. Terror, pure, absolute terror. Ilara. One of the elder Mindweavers stepped forward, concern breaking through his ancient composure. Ilara, report. What do you see? But Ilara could not answer. She was falling into something vast and dark and impossible. Her mind, trained for 10,000 years of evolution to read thoughts like words on a page, had touched something that was not a page at all. It was an ocean. No, not an ocean. Oceans were calm compared to this. This was a storm, a hurricane. 1,000 hurricanes spinning inside a single skull, each one screaming in a different voice, each one pulling her in a different direction. Una Park stood perfectly still. Her eyes were open. Her breathing was steady. On the outside, she looked exactly the same as before. On the inside, she was a universe of chaos. Ilara tried to pull back. She tried to break the connection, but the human mind did not release her. It was not holding her prisoner, not exactly. It was simply too vast, too complex, too full of everything all at once. She could not find the edge. She could not find the surface. She could not find a single moment of silence or peace. And then she realized the most terrifying thing of all. This was normal. This was how humans lived every single day in the amphitheater. The delegates began to whisper. Something was wrong. The reading should have taken seconds. It had been almost a minute now, and Ilara's light was flickering like a dying star. Una felt the telepath in her mind. She felt Ilara's confusion, her fear, her desperate search for something familiar. And for a moment, just a moment, Una felt sorry for her. She had tried to warn them. Humans were not like other species. Humans had never been like other species. And now, for the first time in galactic history, the Mindweavers were about to learn why. Ilara had touched the mind of a warrior from the Velen Empire. His thoughts were sharp and organized, like knives arranged in neat rows. She had touched the mind of a crystalline mathematician, where numbers floated like snowflakes in perfect patterns. She had touched the mind of a poet from the singing moons, where emotions existed as colors. Beautiful and simple. The human mind was none of these things. Ilara fell through layers of thought like falling through clouds. Each layer was different. Each layer contradicted the one before. She saw happiness and sadness existing in the same moment. She saw love and anger wrapped around each other like snakes. She saw memories that were true and memories that were false. And somehow the human did not know the difference. And somehow the human did not care. She saw Una as a child. The memory was sharp and clear. A small girl with black hair standing in a hospital hallway. The lights were too bright. The floor was too clean. A woman was crying somewhere, and the small girl did not understand why. Then the girl understood. Her father was dead. A machine had fallen at the factory where he worked. He had gone to work that morning with a smile on his face, promising to bring home sweet bread for dinner. He never came home. He never brought the bread. He was just gone, suddenly and completely, like a candle blown out by the wind. Ilara felt the grief hit her like a wave. It was enormous, bigger than anything she had ever touched in another mind. It was the grief of a child who had just learned that the universe was not safe, that people could disappear. That love was not enough to protect anyone from anything. But then something strange happened. The grief did not consume the child. It did not destroy her. Instead, the small girl with black hair took a breath. She wiped her eyes. She walked down the hallway to her mother and took her hand. "It will be okay," the child said, even though she did not believe it. Ilara did not understand. How could someone feel such pain and still move? How could someone carry such weight and still stand? The memory shifted. Now Una was older, maybe 16 or 17. She was sitting in a dark kitchen in the middle of the night. Everyone else in the house was asleep. In front of her, on the table, there was a knife. Ilara felt the darkness in the girl's mind. It was not sadness exactly. It was emptiness. It was the feeling that nothing mattered, that nothing would ever matter. that the world would be exactly the same, whether she existed or not. It was a voice whispering that she was tired, so tired, and that there was an easy way to make the tiredness stop. The knife was right there. Ilara wanted to scream. She wanted to reach into the memory and pull the knife away. She wanted to shake the girl and tell her that things would get better, that life was worth living, that she mattered. But this was just a memory. It had already happened. All Ilara could do was watch. The girl picked up the knife. She held it for a long time. The house was silent. The world was silent. Everything was waiting for her to make a choice. Then, slowly, she put the knife down. Not because she wanted to live. Not because she believed things would get better. She put the knife down because something inside her, something small and stubborn and angry, refused to let the darkness win. Spite, the girl chose to live out of pure spite. The memory faded. And Ilara found herself in another part of Yuna's mind. Here there was light. Here there was laughter. A young man with a silly smile was telling terrible jokes. And Yuna was laughing, even though the jokes were not funny. "Tay," Yuna said, "that is the worst joke I have ever heard." "But you laughed," her brother said. "I laughed because you are hopeless. That counts. I made you laugh. I win." The love between them was warm and simple. It was perhaps the only simple thing Ilara had found in this entire mind. But even here, in this moment of pure happiness, there were shadows. There were memories of the dark kitchen. There were fears of loss. There were questions that had no answers. The human mind did not separate these things. It held them all together, light and dark, joy and grief, hope and despair. It was chaos. It was madness. It was impossible, and yet it worked. Ilara tried to understand how. She searched for the structure, the system, the logic that held everything together. In every other mind she had touched, there was a center. There was a core identity, single voice that organized all other thoughts. The human had no center, or rather, the human had many centers, many voices, many selves. Ilara saw the version of Yuna who was confident and strong, who stood before alien councils without fear. She saw the version who was small and scared, who still cried at night when no one was watching. She saw the version who was angry at the universe for taking her father. She saw the version who had forgiven the universe because holding anger forever was too heavy. All of these versions existed at the same time. All of them were real. All of them were Yuna. How did she not go mad? How did any human not go mad? How did they wake up every morning and function when their own minds were battlefields? Then Ilara understood. They did not avoid the battle. They did not try to silence the voices or destroy the contradictions. They lived with them. They fought with them. They made peace with them when possible and fought again when necessary. Every single day, every single human waged a war inside their own skull. And every single day, somehow, they won. Not by defeating the darkness. You could not defeat something that was part of you. They won by choosing over and over again to keep going. To get out of bed, to eat breakfast, to smile at their brothers and make terrible jokes and pretend everything was fine even when it was not. The strength it took was unimaginable. Ilara had touched the minds of warriors who had conquered planets. She had touched the minds of leaders who had guided civilizations for centuries. None of them, not one, had shown this kind of strength, because none of them had ever needed to fight themselves. Ilara tried to pull out of the connection. She had seen enough. She had seen too much. Her own mind was starting to blur at the edges, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of human consciousness. But there was one more thing waiting for her. Yuna felt the telepath trying to leave. And in that moment, she did something that Ilara did not expect. She did not push her out. She did not fight her. Instead, she offered something. A memory. A gift. It was a simple image. Yuna standing on a beach at sunset. The sky was orange and pink and purple, colors bleeding into each other like watercolors. The ocean was calm. The wind was gentle. And for just one moment, there was peace. This is what we fight for, the memory seemed to say. This is why we carry the chaos. Because sometimes, just sometimes, we find moments like this. And they make everything worth it. Ilera finally broke free. She stumbled backward, gasping for air, her light flickering wildly. Her mind was reeling, trying to process what she had experienced. It was too much. It was far too much, and in the center of the amphitheater, Unipark stood exactly where she had been standing before. Calm, patient, unbroken. Like she had done this 1,000 times. Like she did this every single day. Ilara collapsed. Her knees hit the stone floor of the amphitheater with a sound that echoed through the sudden silence. Her pale skin, which had always glowed with steady blue light, now flickered like a broken lamp. Her dark eyes were wide and empty, staring at nothing. Seeing everything, the council erupted. Delegates rose from their seats. Voices overlapped in a dozen different languages, all of them asking the same questions. What happened? What did she see? Is she injured? Is she dying? The Mindweaver elders rushed forward, their own lights pulsing with alarm. They surrounded Ilera, touching her shoulders, her face, her hands, trying to reach her mind. But Ilara's mind was far away, lost in the echoes of what she had experienced. Counselor Vareth struck his staff against the floor 3 times. The sound was like thunder, and it brought silence back to the chamber. Explain, Vareth commanded, his voice cold and sharp. What happened to the reader? No one answered. No one could answer. This had never happened before. In 10,000 years of telepathic readings, no Mindweaver had ever collapsed. No Mindweaver had ever shown fear. They were trained from birth to touch any mind, see any truth, and remain calm. Ilara was not calm. She was trembling. Her whole body shook like a leaf in a storm. Her hands gripped the stone floor as if she was afraid she would fall through it. Slowly, painfully, she raised her head and looked at Yuna. The human had not moved. She stood in the same spot, her hands folded in front of her, her expression patient and perhaps a little sad. She looked like someone waiting for a friend to recover from bad news. Ilara's voice cracked. She swallowed and tried again. She is not one. The chamber went very still. What do you mean? Vareth asked. Her mind. It is not. It is not like any mind I have touched. It is not organized. It is not peaceful. It is Ilara's struggle to find words in any language that could describe what she had seen. It is a war. A constant war. Voices fighting voices. Memories fighting memories. She argues with herself. She doubts herself. She contains multitudes. A crystalline delegate made a sound like breaking glass, which was how their species expressed confusion. All minds have complexity. This is known. No. Ilara shook her head violently. You do not understand. Your complexity is like a building with many rooms. Her complexity is like a storm with many winds. There is no structure. There is no peace. Every moment, every second, she fights to exist. She fights to be one person when she is actually many. The delegates looked at Yuna with new eyes. The human woman seemed so normal, so calm, so ordinary. How could something so chaotic exist behind that quiet face? And yet she functions, Counselor Myra said slowly. The Villani diplomat was known for her emotional stability, and even she could not hide her unease. She travels through space. She represents her species. She stands before us without trembling. Yes, Ilara whispered. That is what frightens me most, Yuna finally spoke. Her voice was gentle, almost apologetic. May I approach her? The Mindweaver elders moved to block her path, but Vareth raised one of his 4 hands. Let her. Yuna walked forward slowly. She knelt beside Ilara, bringing herself down to the telepath's level. Up close, she could see the fear in those dark eyes. It was the fear of someone who had seen something impossible. I am sorry, Yuna said softly. I should have warned you. Ilara stared at her. Warned me? How could you warn me? How could anyone prepare for that? I could have tried. Yuna reached out and touched Ilara's hand. The telepath flinched, but she did not pull away. My people, we are not like yours. Our minds are not quiet places. We live with noise, with conflict, with doubt. We always have. The question burst from Alara like a cry. How do you survive yourselves? Yuna was quiet for a moment. She thought about the question seriously, giving it the respect it deserved. We do not always survive, she admitted. Some of us fall. Some of us break. The storm becomes too much, and we cannot find our way back to shore. She paused. But the ones who do survive, the ones who learn to swim in the chaos, we become something different. Something strong in ways we never asked to be. Ilara looked at her with something that might have been understanding. The dark kitchen. The knife. Yuna's expression did not change, but her eyes grew distant for a moment. Yes, I almost did not survive. But I chose to keep fighting. Not because I believed I would win. Just because I was too stubborn to let the darkness have me, spite, Alara said, remembering what she had seen. You lived out of spite. At first, yes. Later, I found better reasons. But spite was enough to get me through the hardest nights. Yuna smiled, small and sad. We are not a graceful species, Alara. We do not glide through existence. We claw and fight and scream our way forward. It is ugly, it is painful, but it is ours. The amphitheater was completely silent now. Every delegate, every observer, every guard was listening. They were hearing something that changed everything they thought they knew about the strange species from the small. Blue Planet? Counselor Vareth stepped down from his ring. His movements were slow and careful, like someone approaching a dangerous animal. Said she is not one, Vareth said to Alara. You said she contains multitudes. Are all humans like this? Alara looked at Yuna. Yuna nodded. Yes, the telepath said. I believe so. What I saw in her mind, it was not unusual for her kind. It was normal. This is how they exist. This is how they have always existed. A murmur ran through the chamber. Some delegates pulled back in their seats. Others leaned forward with new interest. One species, the shadow beings from the dark worlds, began to whisper among themselves in a language that sounded like wind through dead leaves. Then they are dangerous, one delegate said. Minds that unstable cannot be trusted. They could do anything at any moment. Or they could do nothing. Another delegate countered. They could collapse under their own weight. Such beings should not be able to build civilizations. And yet they have, Counselor Myra pointed out. They have built cities and ships and weapons. They have survived wars and plagues and disasters. They stand before us now, asking for membership in the council. Perhaps that is the most dangerous thing of all, the first delegate said. A species that should not exist, and yet does. A species that should be mad, and yet builds. What do they become when they are not fighting themselves? What happens when they turn that chaos outward? The question hung in the air like smoke. Yuna rose to her feet. She looked around the amphitheater, meeting the eyes of each delegate in turn. Some looked away. Some stared back with fear. A few stared back with something else, something that might have been respect. We do not ask you to trust us completely, Yuna said. We know what we are. We know how we must seem to you. But I promise you this. The chaos you fear is also our greatest strength. We have survived ourselves for 10,000 years. We will continue to survive. And we would rather do it as your partners than as your enemies. She bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that crossed all cultures. The choice is yours. The council had much to discuss. But first, there was one more test to perform. Elder Oris, the oldest of the Mindweavers, stepped forward. His light was steady and ancient, like a star that had burned for billions of years. I will perform a second reading, he announced. I must see for myself. Yuna turned to face him. She did not flinch. She did not hesitate. Then see, she said. I have nothing to hide. Oris placed his hand on her temple, and the council held its breath. Elder Oris had lived for 3,000 years. He had touched the minds of emperors and slaves, heroes and villains, beings of light and creatures of darkness. He had seen thoughts that would drive lesser minds to madness. He had walked through memories of genocide and witnessed dreams of perfect peace. Nothing had prepared him. For this, he entered the human mind with confidence. He had seen Alara's reaction, and he believed he understood. She was young. She was inexperienced. She had simply been overwhelmed by something new. Horus was neither young nor inexperienced. He would succeed where she had failed. For the first 5 seconds, he believed he was right. The human mind was strange, yes. It was chaotic, yes. But Horus had touched chaotic minds before. He knew how to navigate them. He knew how to find the patterns beneath the noise, the order beneath the disorder. He just needed to look deeper, so he looked deeper and deeper and deeper still. The patterns did not appear. The order did not emerge. Instead, the chaos grew thicker, denser, more complex. Every layer he pushed through revealed another layer beneath it. Every voice he followed led to 10 more voices. Every memory he touched opened doors to 100 other memories. This was not a mind. This was a universe. Horus tried to focus on something specific. He chose a simple memory, a meal the human had eaten recently. Food was always a safe place to start. The emotions around food were usually simple. Hunger, satisfaction, pleasure, perhaps nostalgia. He found the memory easily enough. The human was sitting at a table with her brother Tae. They were eating something called kimchi stew. The smell was rich and warm. The taste was spicy and comforting, simple, safe, exactly what Horus expected. But then the memory began to unfold in ways he did not expect. The taste of the stew reminded the human of her mother. Her mother reminded her of her father. Her father reminded her of the day he died. The day he died reminded her of the hospital hallway. The hospital hallway reminded her of the smell of cleaning chemicals. The smell of cleaning chemicals reminded her of a school bathroom where she had cried alone at age 12. The school bathroom reminded her of a bully named Jisoo who had made her life miserable. Jisoo reminded her of the concept of cruelty. Cruelty reminded her of a documentary about war she had watched once. The war documentary reminded her of questions about human nature. Human nature reminded her of herself. All of this happened in less than a second. The human mind did not think in straight lines. It thought in explosions. Every thought triggered a dozen other thoughts. Every memory connected to 1,000 other memories. There was no separation between past and present, between logic and emotion. Between self and world, Horus realized with growing horror that humans did not have thoughts. Humans were thoughts. They did not control their minds. They surfed them. They rode the endless waves of chaos like sailors on a stormy sea, never knowing what the next moment would bring, never certain they would stay afloat. But somehow, keeping their balance anyway, it was the most exhausting thing Horus had ever witnessed. How did they not collapse? How did they not burn out after a single day of this constant mental activity? How did they wake up each morning and do it all over again? Then he saw something that answered his questions. Deep in the chaos, beneath all the noise and conflict and contradiction, there was something else. It was small. It was quiet. It was almost invisible among the screaming voices and exploding memories. It was a choice. Over and over again. In every moment, the human made a choice. She chose which voice to listen to. She chose which memory to follow. She chose which path to take through the infinite branches of her own mind. The choices were not always good. Sometimes she chose wrong. Sometimes she followed the darkness instead of the light. But she always chose. That was the secret. That was how humans survived themselves. They did not have peace. They did not have order. They did not have the luxury of a quiet mind. But they had will. They had the ability to choose even when all choices seemed impossible. They had the stubborn, foolish, magnificent belief that their choices mattered, and so they kept choosing, second by second, minute by minute, day by day. They chose to get out of bed. They chose to eat breakfast. They chose to smile at strangers. They chose to love even when love had hurt them before. They chose to hope even when hope seemed foolish. They chose to live. Horus pulled out of the connection. unlike Alara, did not collapse. He was too old, too experienced, too strong for that. But he stood very still for a long moment, his ancient light flickering with emotions he had not felt in centuries. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. The calm confidence was gone. In its place was something raw and honest. "I have touched the minds of warriors," Horus said, addressing the council. "Warriors who conquered planets, warriors who destroyed civilizations, warriors who killed millions without guilt or hesitation. I was not afraid of them." He turned to look at Yuna. His dark eyes met hers. "I am afraid of her." Council stirred uneasily. Fear from the eldest Mindweaver was unprecedented. What could possibly frighten someone who had seen everything? "Not because she is violent," Horus continued. "Not because she is cruel. Not because she wishes harm to anyone. I am afraid of her because she is impossible. She should not exist. Her mind should have destroyed itself long ago. The chaos I witnessed should have broken her before she learned to walk." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But she exists. She functions. She stands before us with a calm face and steady hands, while inside her skull a hurricane rages without end. She contains her own predator. Every human does. They are born with monsters in their minds, and they spend their entire lives fighting those monsters, and somehow, impossibly, they win." Counselor Vareth spoke carefully. "If they are at war with themselves, how can they be trusted with anything else? How can they be trusted with galactic responsibility?" Horus shook his head. "You misunderstand. The war makes them stronger, not weaker. They are not weakened by doubt. They are forged by it. Every human who survives childhood has already won more battles than most species fight in their entire existence." "But what happens when they stop fighting themselves?" Counselor Mira asked. "What happens when they turn that strength outward?" "They already do," Horus said. "They build. They create. They explore. They reach for stars that are impossibly far away. They do these things not in spite of their chaos, but because of it. The same energy that tears them apart also drives them forward. They cannot rest. They cannot stop. They are always becoming something new." Council was silent. They were beginning to understand, and the understanding frightened them. Yuna watched them with patient eyes. She knew what they were feeling. She had felt it herself many times. The fear of the unknown, the fear of things that did not fit into neat categories, the fear of power that could not be controlled or predicted. But she also knew something else. Fear was just another voice in the chaos. And like all voices, it could be answered with a choice. She chose to speak. "We are what we are," she said simply. "We cannot change our nature any more than you can change yours. Our minds will always be storms. Our hearts will always contain contradictions. But we have learned to live with the storm. We have learned to find calm in the contradiction." She looked around the amphitheater. "We do not ask you to understand us. We only ask you to give us a chance." The silence stretched on. Then slowly Counselor Mira stood. "I call for a vote," she said. "The question of human membership must be decided." And so, after 3,000 years of watching species come and go, the Galactic Council prepared to answer a question it had never faced before. What do you do with a species that scares you? The council deliberated for 9 hours. Yuna waited outside the great amphitheater, sitting on a stone bench that had been carved from asteroid rock 1,000 years before she was born. The corridor was quiet. The lights were dim. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the hum of machines that kept the station alive. She was not alone. Her younger brother Tay sat beside her. He had arrived on the station as support staff, handling communications and logistics while she handled the diplomacy. Now, with nothing left to do, he sat with her and waited. So Tay said, breaking the silence, "You broke an ancient psychic with your overthinking. Mom would be proud." Yuna almost smiled. "I did not break her. I just showed her what we carry. Same thing." Tay leaned back against the wall. "I always knew your brain was too busy. Remember when you stayed awake for 3 days straight because you were worried about a math test? I was 12. You already knew all the answers. You just could not stop thinking about what might go wrong." He shook his head. And now, an entire galactic council is scared of that same brain. Yuna looked at her hands. They were steady. They had been steady all day. Inside, she was anything but steady. Inside, the storm raged as it always did. The voices whispered their doubts. Did she say the right thing? Did she make a mistake? Would her species be judged for her choices? Would they hate her if she failed? She let the voices speak. She did not try to silence them. Silencing them never worked anyway. Are you scared? Tay asked, serious now. Yes. Of what? Yuna thought about it. Of everything. Of failure. Of success. Of what happens if they say no. Of what happens if they say yes. She paused. Mostly, I am scared of letting everyone down. Every human who ever lived, every human who will ever live. Their future depends on what happens in that room. Tay was quiet for a moment. Then he reached over and took her hand. You know what I think? I think that whatever happens, you already did something amazing. You stood in front of aliens who could read minds, and you let them see the truth. You did not hide. You did not pretend. You showed them exactly what we are. He squeezed her hand. That takes more courage than anything I could ever do. Una squeezed back. You flew across the galaxy to bring me clean socks? Important work? Essential, really, she laughed. It was a small laugh, tired and nervous, but real. The voices in her head grew quieter for a moment. Not gone, never gone, but quieter. That was enough. The hours passed. Tay fell asleep against her shoulder, snoring softly. Yuna stayed awake, watching the lights flicker in the corridor, thinking about everything and nothing. She thought about her father. She wondered if he would be proud of her. She thought about her mother, who was waiting back on Earth, probably unable to sleep. She thought about the dark kitchen and the knife and the choice she had made so many years ago. She thought about the beach at sunset, the colors in the sky, the peace that existed, if only for a moment. Between the waves, this is what we fight for. She had told Alara, this is why we carried the chaos. The doors of the amphitheater opened. A guard emerged and gestured for her to enter. Yuna woke Tay with a gentle shake. He blinked, confused for a moment, then remembered where he was. Is it time? It is time. They walked into the amphitheater together. The delegates were back in their seats, their alien faces unreadable. The Mindweavers stood in their ring, their lights steady and calm. Elder Oris watched Yuna with eyes that held something she could not identify. Counselor Vareth stood at the highest point. His staff in one of his four hands. The council has reached a decision, he announced. His voice echoed through the chamber. It was not an easy decision. Our deliberations were longer than any in 300 cycles. Many concerns were raised. Many fears were voiced. Yuna stood in the center of the circle, exactly where she had stood before. She kept her hands folded in front of her. She kept her breathing steady. She waited. Some among us believe that humanity is too dangerous, Vareth continued. Your minds are unpredictable. Your nature is chaotic. You contain elements that no other species contains. You fight wars inside yourselves that we cannot even imagine. He paused. Others among us believe that this is exactly why you should be welcomed. A species forged in internal fire, tempered by self-doubt, yet unbroken. A species that chooses to endure, again and again, despite every reason to give up. Such beings, some argued, do not conquer. They build. They create. They find ways forward when all paths seem closed. Vareth struck his staff against the floor. The sound rang like a bell. The council has voted. Humanity is granted provisional membership. A murmur ran through the chamber. Some delegates looked relieved. Others looked worried. A few simply looked curious, waiting to see what would happen next. Provisional Vareth emphasized, you will be watched. You will be studied. Your actions will be observed carefully. If you prove to be the threat that some fear, your membership will be revoked. But if you prove to be what others hope— He paused, his insect eyes fixed on Yuna. Then, perhaps you will teach us something we have forgotten. Yuna bowed. Thank you, counselor. We will not disappoint you. See that you do not. The formal session was over. Delegates began to rise, conversations breaking out in a dozen languages. But before Yuna could leave, a familiar figure approached her. Ilera, the young mind-weaver, had recovered somewhat. Her light was steadier now, though still dimmer than before. She walked slowly, carefully, like someone learning to use their legs again. Ambassador, Ilara said, "May I speak with you?" Of course. Ilara hesitated, searching for words. In your mind, I saw many things. Things I am still trying to understand. But one thing stays with me more than the others. The dark kitchen. Yes. Ilara looked at her with those deep, dark eyes. You chose to live out of spite. Against what? Against who? Yuna considered the question. It was the same question she had asked herself many times over the years. Against the part of me that said I could not, she finally answered. Against the voice that whispered I was not strong enough, not good enough, not worth saving. I did not defeat that voice. I do not think anyone ever defeats it completely. But I refused to let it win. Ilara was quiet for a long moment. My people have never known such voices, she said slowly. Our minds are peaceful. We think, we feel, we exist, but we do not fight ourselves. I always thought this was a gift. She paused. Now I wonder if it is a limitation. Yuna shook her head. Different, not limited. Your peace is its own kind of strength. You have built a civilization that has lasted 10,000 years. You have helped countless species understand each other. Do not undervalue what you have, because it is different from what we have. Lara smiled. It was a sad smile, but genuine. You are kind. After everything I saw in your mind, all the pain and chaos and struggle, you are still kind. We try to be. Yuna reached out and touched her hand gently. That is perhaps our greatest victory. Not that we survived the storm, but that we come out of it still wanting to help others, still believing that kindness matters. Tay appeared at her shoulder. Sister, the transport is ready. We need to leave soon if we want to make the relay window. Yuna nodded. She turned to go, but Ilara spoke one more time. Ambassador. The sun set. Yuna stopped. The memory you showed me at the end. The beach. The colors in the sky. The peace. Ilara's eyes were bright. That was a gift, was it not? You gave me that moment deliberately. I did. Why? Yuna looked back at her. For a moment, the ambassador was gone, and there was only Yuna. A woman who had fought her own mind for 30 years. A woman who had won and lost and won again. A woman who still believed in sunsets. Because I wanted you to understand, Yuna said. The chaos is not all we are. We also have moments of perfect peace. And those moments, rare as they are, make everything else worth it. She walked away, Tay at her side. Ilara watched her go. And for the first time in her species-long history, a mindweaver understood what it meant to be truly alone inside your own head and what it cost to choose not to be. Outside. The stars waited. The galaxy was vast and strange and full of wonders. Humanity had taken its first real step into that galaxy. There would be challenges ahead. There would be failures and setbacks, moments of despair, but they would endure. They always did. Not because they were stronger, or smarter, or more powerful than other species, but because they had spent their entire existence fighting the hardest battle of all. The battle against themselves, and they had learned that giving up was not an option. The storm would rage on. The voices would never stop. The chaos would never end. But somewhere in every human heart, there was also a beach at sunset, and that was enough.